Welcome back to the big Sunday show. Well, Democrats talked a whole lot about collusion when it came to Trump, but now it looks like the real collusion is between the Biden administration and big tech. Imagine that. Two Republican state attorneys general filing a new lawsuit to expose the administration working with social media giants like Facebook and Twitter to censor what they decided is misinformation. And here is just one example. The White House digital director of the COVID-19 response team asked Instagram to remove a parody account that made fun of Dr. Fauci. The Instagram official's response, less than a minute later, yep, on it.
They've effectively outsourced their censorship. How far does this go? How wide does it go? In this lawsuit, we're going to get answers, because this ought to shock every American, regardless of your political stripe, that the government is actually censoring and silencing Americans.
Censoring and silencing Americans. Knock me over with a feather, David. I had no idea that big tech was colluding with the Democrat Party to censor us conservatives. This doesn't shock me one bit, but I will say this. Now there's a lawsuit. I feel like there's so much discussion about investigating what Facebook and Twitter are doing, holding big tech accountable, and then it's investigation after investigation after hearing, and then we always end up in the same place that it continues to happen. Is this going to be, moving the dial whatsoever, or is this just more talk? What do you think?
If you stay in Washington, you won't move the dial. You'll have politicians clamoring for their 5 minutes of time to make prognostications. Here's what's important about this. You have Eric Schmidt, Jeff Landry, you have Mark Brnovich, who went after the case versus the DNC on ballot harvesting. States attorneys generals are the ones doing this. I've spoken to Eric about this when he first filed the suit, and other attorneys general like Jeff Landry. They're out in the front of this because there could also be potential violations in state law. And while they won't have the discussion about Section 230 at the federal level, neither Republicans or Democrats, by the way, are both being heavily lobbied to leave it where it is. The attorneys general will actually lead this charge. One of these cases gets to the Supreme Court, you see a fundamental change. That's the change in strategy that I think is effective for those attorneys general, and it will even benefit the blue states. So shockingly, a good case will benefit those blue states, and they won't have the blue state blues.
I think it'd be good for everybody if we just finally had big tech platforms that were actually fair to everyone. But Guy, I want to talk about this because we're talking about matters of health back during the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, they wanted to root out misinformation. Does a Dr. Fauci parody account that they answered in less than a minute, does that really qualify as dangerous misinformation? Because they sure treated it like it was.
Well, and I would love, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'd be happy to admit if I am, but if there were a Republican administration picking up the phone, so to speak, to call up, someone at big tech being like, hey, can you take this down for us? Would there just be an unquestioning instant agreement and assent to that? I'm a little skeptical.
There'd be a recording of the call, and it would be on social media in the next minute.
Look at
Trump pressure in Twitter.
Exactly, on speech issues. I think fundamentally what the problem here is no one trusts the arbiters of mis and disinformation to do so accurately or in an honest way. Because whether it's a Fauci parody account, or, I don't know, people suggesting that maybe the virus started in a lab in Wuhan, that was labeled dangerous misinformation, and people were excoriated for even mentioning it, and they weren't allowed to. That was throttled. That was suppressed on social media. The Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, and all these big outlets just saluted and went with that, even though there was absolutely no evidence to support it. So I think people who throw around those terms over and over again, and they get proven wrong on some big issues,
so many.
they have surrendered credibility, and it only heightens the suspicions of many of us.
But I'm glad you brought up our good friend Hunter Biden, because it just so happens our former president, Donald Trump, addressed that very issue. Let's take a listen.
Weirdo Mark Zuckerberg confessed that in 2020, the FBI went to Facebook and the media and gave them the false narrative that the Hunter Biden laptop from hell was Russian disinformation. The FBI made it clear that they did not want the truth about the criminality and influence peddling of the Biden family coming out before the election, because that would hurt the chances of Joe Biden, who virtually never left his basement, winning the election.
So our president brought up a good point here, though, Anita, that this actually has consequences for elections. It's not just a parody account that maybe somebody liked or COVID misinformation. This actually goes to the core of what was happening before the 2020 election and how big tech colluded. Does this go to a First Amendment issue at some point as well?
Absolutely it does. And it really bothers me as a journalist because it absolutely goes to the First Amendment and freedom of the press, which is one of the things that sets this country apart from so many others that don't have that. And I can't help but also see some hypocrisy here because President Biden likes to call out MAGA supporters and call them semi-fascists. But if you look at the definition of fascism, the history there, one of the first things fascist regimes do is they try to stifle and control the press. So this is not a good look for the administration if it comes to be true that they were colluding with big tech. It's not a good look.
Well, the truth is actually there. We have the emails between the CDC, for example, that I believe the Washington Free Beacon first put out. And when you look at this, it's a track record. James Rosen, the Obama-Biden administration, Cheryl Atkinson, surveilling journalists. That's a true violation of the First Amendment when the federal government or any government is involved.
Well, it certainly is. And, you know, they wanted to have weekly meetings about this. So it sounds like a whole lot of fun. Just a casual little discussion to debunk everything that the right is saying. But anyway.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.